am 83 years old, and when people find out I live alone, they get a look on their face that I have come to know very well. It is somewhere between pity and panic, like I have just told them I sleep on a roof or cross busy streets with my eyes closed. Alone, they say, at your age, as if being alone at 83 is a diagnosis, as if the prescription is someone else's spare bedroom and a schedule I had no hand in making. My daughter Linda said it to me just last spring. She means well. Linda has always meant well. She called me one evening and said, "Mom, don't you get scared being there by yourself?" And I sat with that question for a moment before I answered her, because the thing Linda was scared of, me being alone, was not the thing I was scared of at all. So let me say this plainly, right here at the start, before I tell you everything else. I live alone. I have lived alone for 15 years in the same house Vincent and I shared for the 31 years before that. The same kitchen with the window that looks out over the back garden. The same creak on the second stair. The same smell of old wood and the lavender soap I've used since before any of my children were born. And I am telling you, not hoping, not pretending, not talking myself into it on a difficult Wednesday. I am telling you that I have never in 83 years on this earth been this consistently, stubbornly, peacefully happy. Now, before you decide I'm a cold woman who never loved anyone deeply, let me tell you about Vincent. I loved that man for 46 years. We married young, the way people did, and he was not a perfect man. He had a stubbornness that could fill a room, and a way of presenting decisions as already made. We're going to David's for the holidays. Not a question, never a question. And he had a temper that didn't shout, but went quiet in a way that was somehow worse. But he was mine, and I was his, and when he died, quietly, a Tuesday afternoon, his hand in mine, I genuinely believed the world had ended. It hadn't. That was the shock of it. The mail kept coming. The birds outside my kitchen window kept singing like nothing at all had happened. I remember standing at the sink 3 days after the funeral, washing a single coffee cup, just one, not two, and thinking, so this is what alone sounds like. It sounds like your own breathing. It sounds like a clock you never noticed before. It sounds like the refrigerator and the house settling and your own footsteps and nothing else. For the first 2 years, I will not lie to you, it was hard. Not hard like climbing something, hard like learning to walk again after someone removes a part of you that you didn't even know was structural. Vincent and I had built a life so tangled together that pulling us apart left threads hanging everywhere I looked. I'd reach for him in the night and find cold sheets. I'd cook enough for 2 people and sit staring at the second plate. I'd hear something on the radio and turn to tell him, and the empty chair would just sit there being empty, which is the loudest thing a chair can do. I kept his reading glasses on the nightstand for 4 months. I know how that sounds, but every night I'd see them there, and it meant he was still a little bit present. The morning I finally put them in the drawer, I stood there for a long time. They're just glasses. They shouldn't carry that weight, but they did. And then my children started managing me. David called with a checklist: health, house, money, and hung up satisfied. Linda called every day, sometimes twice. "Mom, are you eating? Mom, did you sleep? Mom, maybe you should come stay with us for a while." She has a heart that is genuinely enormous, Linda does, but she has a way of loving you that feels slightly like being administered, like you are a situation she has taken on and she will not rest until the situation is resolved to her satisfaction. And then there was Meadowbrook. I won't walk through all of it today. I've told that story before, and some of you already know it. 30 days in a facility I did not choose, in a room that smelled of industrial cleaner and other people's loneliness, while my 5 children stood in a hallway outside and told each other this was for my own good. And the thing is, they believed it. That's the part I had to make my peace with. They weren't trying to hurt me. They were terrified, and terrified people reach for the nearest solution, and the nearest solution had a name and a monthly rate and a brochure with photographs of women smiling at salads. I came home on a Thursday afternoon in October. I put my bag down in the hallway, and I stood there, and the house was quiet. That specific quiet that lives in a place where only one person breathes. And I thought, all right, this is what I have: a house, a body, a name, and whatever time is left. So what am I going to do with it? I didn't have an answer that day, but I had the question. And sometimes the question is the first honest thing you've said in months. I started writing things down that week, not for anyone else, just for me. Small notes, things I was figuring out, rules I was making for myself, about how I wanted to live, what I needed, how I was going to stay in this house and stay myself inside it. It felt strange at first, writing things down like that, like I was leaving instructions for someone who might need them. I suppose I was. It was my granddaughter Claire who found the notebook months later. She read the whole thing without telling me. She came back the next day and said, "Gran, other women need to read this." She was the one who put it online. She called it The Ultimate Guide to Freedom. I still feel a little odd about that, honestly, but I'll come back to it at the end, because first, I need to tell you what I actually learned. I started small when I came home from Meadowbrook. I rearranged the living room. I know how that sounds, but you have to understand that living room had not changed since Vincent and I moved in. His chair was by the window, a brown leather armchair he loved. My chair was by the lamp, a smaller one, positioned specifically so as not to compete with his. Every piece of furniture arranged around a marriage, and the marriage was over, and the furniture didn't know it yet. So I moved his chair. I dragged it myself. It took 20 minutes, and I pulled something in my shoulder that complained for 2 weeks, but I dragged it to the spare room and shut the door. And I moved my chair, right over to the window where his had been. And I sat down, and the light came through and hit my face, and I understood immediately that I had spent years sitting in the wrong spot. The window was better. It had always been better. I just never sat there because that was Vincent's place. I cried a little, not from grief exactly, from something stranger, the shock of discovering you still have preferences, that you still want things, that you are not simply what remains after someone else is gone. Pay attention to this, because it matters more than almost anything else I'm going to say today. After the chair, other things followed. Small revolutions, each one. I painted the bathroom pale yellow. Vincent would have hated it. He liked everything white, said color in bathrooms was distracting, which is exactly the kind of thing Vincent would say. But I painted it yellow, and every morning when I walk in there, it feels like stepping into a small cup of light, and I think, I chose this. This is mine. I started eating what I actually wanted for dinner, which turned out to be breakfast, eggs and toast at 7 in the evening, sometimes with a tomato from the garden. Linda would be horrified. But here is what I discovered. When you live alone, there is no one to raise an eyebrow at your eggs at 7 in the evening. There is no one to disapprove of soup from a can, or ice cream at 11 in the morning, or reading until 2 in the morning because you cannot put the book down. I stopped performing a life and started living one. And I need you to hear that distinction because it is the most important thing I can tell you. For decades, for most of my life, honestly, I had been performing wife, performing mother, performing the woman who never complains, who shows up with a casserole, who keeps the marriage alive through the hard years, who holds the whole family together, and still arrives at every event with a smile that cost her something she never told anyone about. I was good at it. I was very good at it. But nobody ever asked me what I wanted. And I gave so completely, kept nothing back, not an hour, not a decision, not a single afternoon that belonged only to me. And when Vincent died and the house went quiet, I stood in my own kitchen and thought, what do I actually like? I didn't know. At 80 years old, I did not know. That is not a tragedy. That is a quiet scandal that happens in kitchens all over the world to women who spent their whole lives answering everyone else's questions and never once asking their own. So I started figuring it out, like a teenager, but with arthritis and a library card and absolutely no patience left for pretending. I discovered I love the radio. Not television, radio, the kind where you build the pictures yourself. I found a station that plays old dramas on Sunday evenings, and I sit in my chair by the window with chamomile tea and I listen. And sometimes I fall asleep in the middle of a story, and that is completely fine. I have earned the right to fall asleep whenever I want. I discovered I like walking in the early morning before the neighborhood wakes up. Not far, my hip has opinions about distance, but down to the end of the street and back, past the elm tree that was here before I was, past the Henderson's house with the crooked gate. 6 minutes if I'm feeling well, 12 if I'm not, but it's mine. I discovered I like my own company. That is not something women of my generation were encouraged to say. We were supposed to need people, need a husband, need children, need to be useful to someone. And I do need people, but not the way I was taught to need them. I don't need someone to complete me. I was always complete. I just had too many other lives standing in front of mine for me to see it clearly. Now, I want to be careful here because I am not preaching the gospel of isolation. Loneliness is real. I feel it. There are nights when the house is so quiet, the silence has a sound, a kind of hum, and I think, I could fall tonight and no one would know until David calls on Sunday. That thought comes to visit me sometimes. I let it visit. I just don't let it stay, because here is what I have built instead. Not a safety net. That sounds too passive, too much like waiting to fall. A web, something I made thread by thread, on purpose, anchored to things that are solid. There is my neighbor Bet, who has lived next door for 20 years and who comes over on Wednesday afternoons and drinks tea and argues with me about books and tells me things about her garden that I did not ask to know and that I am genuinely glad to hear. There is Priya across the street, a nurse with a 4-year-old named Sam, who comes to my door sometimes holding drawings he made, fish that look like potatoes with legs, and says, "Miss Laura, this is for your fridge." And I put it on my fridge, and suddenly the kitchen looks like someone lives here, someone who is loved in small and imperfect and ordinary ways. There is my granddaughter, Claire, who calls every Thursday evening just to talk, not to check, just to talk. and my grandson Noah, who sends me articles he thinks I'll find interesting, which I usually do. These connections are not the same as a full house. They are not supposed to be. They are something different. They are chosen. Every one of them is chosen. And that is what makes them precious in a way that the old life, the decades of obligation and love and noise, never quite was. About the ultimate guide to freedom. I need to be honest with you about something. My son David called me again this week. He has called 3 times in the past month. He says I am embarrassing the family. He says I am putting private things into the world that should stay private, and he wants me to take it down. Linda agrees with him. I have thought about doing it. More than once I have sat at this table in the quiet and thought about just letting it go, because I am 83 years old and I do not have unlimited nerve left. But then I read the letters. Women who are sitting alone in houses that have gone too quiet. Women who are eating soup from a can and feeling ashamed of it instead of free. Women who moved their chair to the window for the first time at 78 and cried and didn't know why. And I cannot take it down. Not yet. The link is in the pinned comment below this video. I don't know how much longer I will keep it there. David is pressing, and honestly, I grow less certain by the week, but it is there right now. If something I said today found you, click it now. Don't wait for a better moment. There isn't one. If this story reached you today, leave me a like. It tells me to keep going. I read every comment you leave here, every single one. So if you've been sitting in the wrong chair, if you've been performing a life instead of living one, if you ate eggs for dinner last night and felt guilty about it when you shouldn't have, tell me. I'm here. Subscribe if you want to keep talking. Every week I sit down at this table and I tell you the truth about what this life actually looks like from the inside of it. Not the performed version, the real one, because someone has to. And I have decided at 83 that someone is going to be me.